Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. We are back with leadleftgrowright.com. Tony Marolt is excited to be here again, and he's a chief leader and president of the company. It's a consulting and publishing company, and it's really centered around leadership and the integrated process of so many different things. He's going to get into that specifically. Let me have him introduce himself today. Hi, Tony. How are you?
Hi, Jill. I'm doing terrific. I'm Tony Marolt. I am the chief leader and president of Lead Left Grow Right. And my book that's out right now is Leadership Quotient. I spent 25 plus years in the corporate world and 9 plus years in the Navy. So I've got a little bit of leadership experience, which I have tried to apply in the book to make practice meet theory.
Oh, fantastic. I love your shirt today. For those that are on the podcast, we're also live on a Zoom today. It seems like he's a Marvel lover. Is that true?
Yeah, and I pretty much wear these all the time whenever I go up because at least 1 in 10 people comment on it. So in today's world where people frequently don't talk to each other, unfortunately, I get comments all the time. So it's a way for me to engage. And this says the periodic table of Marvel. And if you think about it, the kind of leadership I'm espousing, I just thought of this morning as I was putting it on. Lead left, grow right. Leading left is very much what Marvel superheroes do. They may have someone like Captain America who's led the Avengers, for instance, but there have been other people. And if you watch the movies, you don't see Captain America saying, hey, Iron Man, go and do this. They all work as a team. They're all individual leaders and they treat each other with the same respect as fellow leaders. So it's a good analogy as well.
Perfect. And let me see that chart behind you. Is that for us today, or is that your specific notes from working with someone recently?
No, that I just, I tend to come up with analogies. I find that analogies and are ways of painting pictures, and pictures themselves are terrific at getting points across. Unfortunately, when people just speak, you don't necessarily leave them with something that they can hold on to. Whereas if I said, hey, I went to the outlet this morning, I got electrical shock and I was knocked backwards. Well, that paints a pretty vivid picture. So that's what I try to do even throughout the book, is try and use pictures where possible, or at least ways of describing things and stories, case studies, etc.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. My goodness, there's so much to you, to your work. And if you don't mind sharing a little bit about your background, I know I was reading here, you say you're retired, right? Except for your business and occasional teaching at the college, undergraduate, grad. So tell us a little bit about yourself there. My goodness. And I want to talk about your books and everything. Yes, we're going to get to that. Tell us a little more about you personally.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. We've got several of these. So for college, I've taught at both the undergrad in person and online level, as well as the same thing at the MBA level. Most of the classes I've taught are one, leadership, supply chain management, project management, which was a big part of who I've been, particularly the last 10 to 15 years in my corporate career. But project management is one of those things that every one of us has to do project management, even if we're running to the store with a grocery list. So.
And now let me ask you this. So you certainly, you talk about you're selling your books. What books are these in particular? You're an author as well, Tony?
Yes, the Leadership Quotient is my first book. We'll see if I do some more. I have some ideas in mind, but I've always wanted to write a leadership book. And the way I arrived at that was over the years, I would observe both good and bad behavior in myself or in others as I practiced leadership. And so I would write quotes down, and I use those, the best of about 100 quotes when I finally retired, and use those as a basis for the book to flesh out the model that I developed over the years. which in many ways is different from when I left the United States Naval Academy and the kind of leadership that is required in the service. There's definitely some overlap, but I definitely made some changes in my leadership learnings and styles over the years as I adjusted into the corporate world and found what works and what doesn't.
And here you are. So let's talk more about the book. Where can we get the book? Find out more about it.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I think it's in hardback, paperback now, and Kindle.
That's exciting. Congratulations on that. And what's the other book you're working on?
I haven't started one yet. I have a thought in mind called Continuum, but where life is a continuum in various degrees. But I have not begun to put pen to paper on my next book.
Got it. But you just have this innate way about you. You want to educate, you want to teach, you want to show the world and just enlighten everyone, which is a great gift because you are helping so many people. Tony, who helps you? Who inspires you?
Well, people that have inspired me. I had a silent generation mom who raised 7 children.
Wow.
I'm the oldest of 7. I have 3 brothers and sisters. And then I had the greatest generation father who fought in World War II. And between the two, I really, really respected how well they brought us up, the lessons that they brought to bear. My mom instilled in me, she was an educator by trade, a love for learning and for reading and just experiencing new ideas and not just pushing your arm out and stiff arming people every time someone has a new idea. I like to try to be open as much as possible.
Got it. And also want to bring up the fact that Lead Left Grow Right, basically your method, your philosophy, it really is non-traditional. Could you talk a little bit more about the fundamentals of what you do and the people you help, individuals, businesses, and so much more?
Right. So Lead Left Grow Right, leading left is very countercultural in this sense. In traditional leadership, the person who holds the title is most often called the leader. So Steve Jobs of Apple, right, or the president of the United States. But for me, my basic premise is everyone is a leader, sort of like the superheroes. Everyone is a leader. Everyone has their own unique, innate gifts, some of which can be brought to bear even further. And I believe leadership is a skill. So you can develop in all of the 4 areas. You see some of the model behind me. Your IQ, you could be born the greatest genius in the world, but if you don't continue to learn, you had an IQ at 150 when you were 4 years old, but you don't do anything for the next 14 years, then guess what? Your IQ is not gonna be high any longer. EQ, which is kind of become in vogue in the last 10 or 15 years. It's still a little squishy on how people define it, but I define it as basically your ability to interact and relate to other people and convey your messages back and forth to each other. DQ is the decision quotient. Quite often we have leaders who are very good, they're really smart, they're good with people, but they can't make a decision to save their life, right? So DQ is very, very important that you not be overly cautious or fly by the seat of your pants too much. And then once you make a decision, there are people that make a decision, but then they don't have the means to implement that decision. And that's the action quotient. Getting that decision and all of the articles that fall under that, the activities to come to fruition to solve a problem or achieve a goal.
Got it. Wow. And let me ask you this. You're devoted to achieving the process of mastery and leadership excellence clearly in every organization. Your core belief is that everyone, I love it's all in capitals, everyone is a leader when they're provided that proper, safe, and trusted environment in a sense. Can you talk a little about, an IQ, EQ, DQ, AQ quads are maximized for the individual success. It's funny because you're teaching me stuff I've never even heard of before. I got my master's degree in communication arts. I'm no genius though, but I'm like, okay, I know I IQ, but the AQ, the DQ, the EQ. Yeah. So please.
Well, that's why I hope my book has a lot of practical things for folks to use and apply, from communications to actual steps to take when forming a group or leading a group, etc. So with EQ, for instance, I would say I'm a very huge student, those that know me well, of Myers-Briggs and personality types and all of the other kinds of things that are out there for communicating, like 6 hats or the Herman Brain Development Instrument, et cetera, et cetera. So EQ being that ability to relate, every one of us has an opportunity. We're having an opportunity right now to interact with each other. Well, how successful that is or not depends on your EQ and my EQ. So if I am a very quiet, shy person who doesn't like to speak up ever, we would have a difficult time carrying on this conversation. But that doesn't mean that that person can't be taught to have much better EQ skills. And there's many, many exercises that you can do to improve your EQ. One of the things that I tell people as an exercise, I've had my teams actually do this. When I worked at Hallmark Cars, there was actually a big bridge between 2 buildings. And it was a bridge that many, many people crossed every day. So I told my folks, I said, do this experiment, walk by and see how long it takes for anyone to respond to you, if they respond to you. And I said, so here's what you should do. If they don't respond to you, try it with the next person. If you see that they're looking down, people have so many different ways to avoid each other, to talk to each other. So I said, if they're looking down or outside, or all of a sudden pause, take a look at their wristwatch, go ahead and say, hey, how are you doing today? I'm doing terrific. And it's amazing what happens. It startles people, but we all need to be more aware of each other. And if that's one of the first steps, if you're more aware of how other people are, it can be how they're dressed, how they're talking, what nonverbal cues are they giving you, then you'll be able to take some action to interact with that person. So kind of like the shirt, it serves as a point of reference where people have some commonality. And in today's world, we definitely need some more commonality.
So you did that on purpose to see if I would notice, if I would comment. Look at you. Now you got me thinking. I'm like, I have nothing special on. I have a black shirt. I have my necklace. I'm like toying with it. It was crooked, but look at you. Master of the mind, right? Yeah, for sure. Wow. All right. So what else did you want to discuss for today? There's a lot in your notes about how you got your start, about your family background growing up. I'm not sure what you wanted to share today here.
Yeah, today I'd like to get a little bit into the model, the introduction in chapter 1 a little bit in the time we have left. So how I developed that model, as I said, which is a little bit countercultural, but it does start with the premise that everyone is a leader. So if you go into that discussion or that mind frame, as you work with people, whether you're a contributing member of a team or whether you're officially leading the team or the project, if you go into it saying, everyone is a leader on this team, and my job, whether a contributor or whether I'm an official leader, is to find out as much as I can about this person and let them know as much as I can about me, so that we kind of understand where each other's strengths and lesser strengths are. I don't like to say weaknesses. There was a course a long time ago that I took called Clear Purpose, and they talk about lesser strengths because truly they're not weaknesses. They're just not as developed, right? So if it's sort of like your muscles, right? Mine are not in the greatest shape, but if I wanted to, I could get my biceps better by increasing muscle memory and putting tension on them through weightlifting. So with this model, even though you may be born with an IQ that's average, that doesn't mean that you can't raise it. And some of the smartest people I know are people that are not officially educated, right? They don't hold degrees like you and I do at the
Sure.
master's level or a PhD or even an undergrad degree, but they're some of the smartest. My father was one of those kind of people. I always said if he went to college, who knows what he could have been, but he knew about everything, and mostly it's because he tried stuff. And if he
Mm-hmm.
failed, he just learned from that. So
Yeah.
all of us can develop our IQ, our understanding of processing. And with YouTube now, you could pretty much, you could theoretically become a doctor, or at least have the knowledge of a doctor if you're willing to watch hundreds of hours of videos, etc. So then you move into the EQ quadrant, and that is developed over time. And if you people with a high EQ, a lot of times in society we call them introverts, or not introverts, excuse me, extroverts,
Got
right?
it.
So we assume that all extroverts have amazing abilities to have EQ. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes that's not,
That's
because
true. Yeah.
introversion and extroversion is really about where you get your energy. So extroverts, they like to, they can go to a party and they come out at the end of the party and say, man, let's go and have an early morning breakfast. Whereas introverts are like, that was a pretty good time, but I got to go home and go to bed. I'm kind of tired out from interacting with all those people, right? Jill, have
Yeah.
you had
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, it's so funny. I don't do late nights, period, because I spent like my half of my life getting up at 1:30 in the morning to work in television news. So
Oh,
I've always been that. I'm an extrovert, but when it comes to that, I'm an introvert. I just need my sleep. So going
right.
out like past like 8 o'clock was a no-no. So I sounded like more of an introvert, but I really was. So there's exceptions in every field.
Oh
But
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and it's a continuum, right? So potentially my next book, but yeah, there are different levels of introversion and extroversion, and society places certain values. They value extroverts generally more than introverts, because they are the majority, and sometimes that's hard for us introverts to actually fit in. But we find ways, and that's why I say even introverts that are very, very shy on a spectrum, they can move points up the continuum to become much more, with proper coaching, they can become much more effective at their interpersonal skills.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Not everyone has it though, but let me ask you, when you're working with a client, are you doing any in-person sessions or is it all Zoom? I mean, because you can work with anyone all over the world at this point, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a combination of both in person and in Zoom. It depends on how, depends on what it is. If it's leadership development sorts of things, you can do certain things from Zoom. But ideally, yeah, if more companies are starting to demand this and workers are rebelling, right? Because they've enjoyed the opportunities that remote learning helps, avails you, but they also know that in terms of continuity of team, it's not the same. Humans are social animals. They're meant to interact with each other. You can get a certain amount of interaction with Zoom, but it's still not the same thing. So companies are having to think. Some are going ahead and saying, everyone needs to come back except for one day a week or
Yeah.
something like that, right? So if it's on a process mastery or process learning side, then typically that's a much harder lift to try and do it from a Zoom call. You really have to get in there and see the processes and see the people that are doing the processes, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, it's funny because I know we spoke last time that you're a veteran, the Navy. Thank you for
Right,
your service. You've done that
right.
for what, over 10 years? I
Thank you
know
for
you were a
letting me
little,
serve.
no, please, you're adorable. Cub Scout, Boy Scout, but now I didn't know about your work with Hallmark for 25 plus years.
That was, when I exited the Navy, I briefly worked in a turkey kill and meat packing facility.
Mm-hmm.
And that would happen to be a union facility. And the kinds of leadership that they were using, I used to call it the 1910 management philosophy. And after 6 months, I knew I could I could never square myself with working like that. It's just not me as a leader. So I left. Hallmark had been interested in me before I left the service. So I reached out to them and they still were interested. So I interviewed there, and 25 plus years later, I had a long and very interesting and varied career, which for me is someone who likes new challenges. That was great that I had the opportunity to do a lot of different jobs.
Beautiful. And unfortunately, I know we started late today for some technical issues, but we
I
do still have
understand.
4 minutes left. So I know you want to, last week we started to talk some about the chapters of your book. Did you want to digress into that and talk specifically about some of them? Or for today's show, what else did you have in mind?
Sure. So the first chapter that we've touched on a little bit is really around the leadership model. And I think the one important thing here, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it because we've talked it out, but there's this big circle, and that's called, I call that LC, or the learning capability.
Mm-hmm.
As we've talked about in some of those examples, unless you're willing to learn, you're not going to be able to increase the size of any of those squares, because someone, for instance, might only have this much of an action quotient. They're not good at implementing plans. But once you teach them how to do that, then that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the learning capability is a really important thing to understand in the model. And then upcoming chapters that hopefully we can get into a little bit. The second chapter is really focused on you, and the theme is depend on yourself and strengthen your muscle memory. I used that earlier. The third chapter is how can you shine as a leader? How can you bring light where darkness may be? The fourth and fifth chapters focus on the future and on others. The fifth chapters I had to put in because of everything that was going on in society at the time I was writing. And it's still true today, but it's about fact versus fiction. And one of the quotes in there is "That's a fact, Jack," which comes from the Bill Murray movie Stripes a long time ago. So the other chapters would be, one is the cost of poor leadership, which that's a very different concept for folks to understand. What is the loss of having bad leaders in your organization? There's a summary chapter, which will kind of wrap up towards the end. And there's a kind of an advanced course, I call it, where some more advanced topic, I call it, well, it's sort of like getting your MBA in leadership. It's just a chapter, but it has some additional tools that you can use. And then the chapter squeezed in between those is all about, I call it making the sausage. So what's all the stuff that goes behind the scenes in a corporation or organization?
Oh my gosh.
And some tactics on how to address that. So
yeah. Wow. Well, thank you, Tony. So unfortunately, it's time to go. Would you mind giving us the best form and all forms of contact for you today?
Sure. You can either call me at 816-694-4656, 816-694-4656, or reach out to me through my website, Lead Left Grow Right, all one word, leadleftgrowright.com, and just enter your information on the contact form and it'll come to my email, or you can email me directly at tony.marolt@gmail.com.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, and to much success to you again. Check out his book. Don't worry. Don't forget to go to Amazon or go to the website as well. You have a great day, and looking forward to the next time we speak. Bye-bye.
All right.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you can now listen live on the MyTuner Radio and online Radio Box apps for iOS, Android, and the Amazon App Store. Or check us out online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on onlineradiobox.com/US so you don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me. What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.